Welcome. If you're new, welcome back if you're returning. Today's video is a little different. I was recently visiting a friend and this was the view from their window. And it was so peaceful, it was so idyllic, I thought I'd have a little walk. And as I walked up this hill to this graveyard, I realised something. And other than memorialising those who have passed, cemeteries are a very valuable historic resource. They're reminders of social history, rural communities, lifestyles, religion, and every cemetery has its own story. As I walked around this graveyard, I noticed that the gravestones reflect the era that they were made. The older the stone, the more elaborate and ornate. This also reflected your social or financial standing. And it actually made me think 90% of the population have spent time looking back and thinking about how things used to be. We want that warm and fuzzy feeling we want to get when we think about times gone by. This actually impacts our purchasing decisions as well. Nostalgia, whether it's real or imagined, can connect us to simpler or happier times. Lots of us experience vicarious nostalgia, and this is when we romanticize about era or times in the past, often never having lived in those times. Timeless design can come quite expensively. Authentic historic antiques and bespoke items are often way out of our budget, whereas thrifting is the poor man's answer to a curated and vintage home. So, how did my style evolve? How did our style evolve? Because we all have a similar taste in homes. We like to thrift, we like nostalgia. Well, it occurred to me. So, I grew up in a house that was on the grounds of an old estate. In the 1700s, this estate was Worley Hall. And it was owned by a landowner, and most of the people around either worked on the estate or, it provided jobs and a living for a lot of people in the area. Over time, people's fortunes changed, the wars came, nobody wanted to work at these big houses and they couldn't afford to keep people, to pay them, because people wanted more money. The days of the servitude were over. So after their decline, the house had various incarnations, but there was a great fire and it was sold on to a land developer. So this land developer obviously had no use for the house, really had no use for the ground. He'd got it at a discount price, so he decided to develop the majority of the area, and housing was built. Now, the main house and the parkland immediately surrounding it was saved by a society because they wanted to protect it, because it was beautiful, historic property that was obviously no longer there. It had been demolished by this point. And then you had these grounds that were quite historically significant, and these then were protected, and those protected areas were the woodlands and the grounds that I grew up playing with my friends and siblings. To that extent, toys that we had when we were growing up. I had a Madame de Pompadour doll, which I had when I was a kid. I loved this doll, and I remember trying to find out as much about this doll as I could, and finding out about French history and Louis XIV, because that was the time area that she came from. And all of this impacted and stayed with me throughout my life. Another big influence on my life were William Morris, the whole arts and crafts era. We used to visit places like this growing up, and obviously they would stay with you, they would impact you, or they did. I was very impacted by them. I used to love going to these places. I loved the decor, I loved the history. Not everybody does. And visiting a lot of these stately homes and castles, and I mean, we were lucky, the environment that we grew up in, we were allowed to see and visit and absorb all of this history. And this is what you try to reproduce then in your own home. You're trying to get those warm and fuzzy feelings back. Even though you never lived through these times, you imagine how it would have been and how you would have felt in these particular eras. The word vintage has been used to describe a range of different things, from wines and cheeses to clothing. This hallway to me has a vintage vibe. It's Edwardian. The landing to me is Victorian, and then I go back into the bathroom and again I come back to Victorian. It's special pieces that are added together to give the feeling of a vintage look. Collectively in this bathroom, I love everything, but one of my favourites is the room divider. It was a Victorian piece that was in a terrible state that I refinished and added the fabric to. So that is something that in every room, it's nice to have one item that stands out as your favourite. The key when you're buying items for a vintage look is not to buy anything that's too new. Don't be afraid to mix different styles together. Antique accessories do not need to be kept together. You can combine pieces that are more modern and some that are older, and you'll find the overall look will be that of antique or vintage. Again, everything in this dining room is thrifted, 99%. All the pictures, all the furniture. This was my little homage to the coronation, which is in a few days. I just thought I'd throw this together. I have lots of Queen Elizabeth II memorabilia, not so much of the new king, so I hope to rectify that soon. But I digress. This room again is all different eras, all different pieces, mostly wood, but even on the table, the vases, one is a French country, one is an English country picture with a lace piece, but it all just goes together. into the living room. Now, if the hallway was Edwardian, the upstairs landing is Victorian, and back into the bathroom, and we're talking Edwardian. The living room, again, is a bit of a mishmash. The furniture is basically Victorian, Edwardian, and again, everything's been thrifted. The fireplace was made at home. The tiles are vintage, those are Victorian. The colours, again, they are more of an Edwardian with the dark. I suppose nowadays they're calling it the dark academia, but if you look back in history, it's Victorian, Edwardian. The dark colours come from there. One of my pillows is almost colonial. The pictures are vintage pieces that have been, the inserts have been swapped out for prints that I've printed off Etsy. Same with these two pictures. Now, the picture frames are not authentic. They are like an epoxy type of thing, but they still add to this scheme and they look authentic enough. That's one of the things when you're going with for a vintage style, is to try and keep it organic. This little table, I had two side tables that I probably bought 25 years ago. They have solid marble tops. I'm only using one table at the moment, but I've got both of the top marble tops together, just to look after them. Real wood items, real pottery items. Don't have plastics, don't have manufactured items, because that will detract from the look that you're going for. This is one of my favourite pieces. I've had this is probably 60-70 years old. I've had it for a few years, and I've added to it. The curtains were vintage chinoiserie fabric that I picked up at a flea market, so they're more French, I think, than maybe a little bit of English country again, but they all add to that vintage look. And I don't think there's anything more English country than the equestrian look, which I have in a couple of places now in the house, in the living room and then in the kitchen also. The couch is a little bit more modern and it's not exactly my taste, but it does lend itself to a more of a vintage look. This little couch, this two-seater couch, is one of my favourites also. You'll see that I have some new William Morris pillows that I've sort of dotted around the place as well. And you can see everything, it doesn't match, but it goes together. If you try and tie in with one familiar piece and try and keep your colour schemes similar so that they tie together. But you will find if you love the pieces, you usually can make them work, if not in one room, in another room. I was watching a recent episode from She Holds Dearly, in which she picked up a little record player for herself because she'd been using her daughter's. And I thought, I've got this, I've had this for years. I was storing it under one of my cabinets and I thought I should get it out and start using it. So thank you, She Holds Dearly, you inspired me. So we move on into the French country bedroom. Even the wallpaper was thrifted in here. Again, the chandelier, if you remember, I made that. This is a really cool wall. This is a feature wall as you walk directly into. It's the first thing you see. I've had various art pieces on this wall, but I call it my ladies' wall now. So I've got all my pictures of various ladies, and then I've added to it the cherubs. I had one piece and then I thrifted another piece, and again it all adds to that very French country feel, but it's very unique and it's something that just keeps building. Every time I find a new little cherub, it goes on the wall, so it's ever growing. into the kitchen, which has a very French country vintage style. But it's not just for furniture. You can create a vintage look in your home by mixing and matching different styles. Like I said, you can use natural colours and textures, or adding organic materials like wood or clay for your decor. Don't be afraid to fake things. I wanted a brick wall. I wasn't going to build a brick wall, and I ended up getting a brick wall. The same with the tile. I wanted a Delft tile. I couldn't afford a Delft tile, so I made them out of paper and stuck them on. You don't always have to have authentic or real. You can fake it. One of my favourite pieces in the kitchen is this cabinet. It was a thrifted cabinet, $70. It's like an old IKEA piece with a marble countertop. I added the Delft paper tile to it, and it looks French country. As with 90% of the kitchen, everything is thrifted and vintage of a sort. Some items are newer. I have two big white IKEA cabinets that I've had for many years, which are again more of a traditional style, but they go with my kitchen or my dining room. They go with what I want them to, because of the style that they are. This cabinet came from an old schoolhouse, so it's got to be the 1900s. It's a lovely old piece. It was in a bad state. I've repaired it and painted it up, added wheels to it, and it fits perfectly in with my decor. These white cabinets I keep in the kitchen. They are extra storage. You can see I have my cookbooks, my bits that I don't use every day. It's a drinks cabinet. It's extra storage for kitchen items. It's floor to ceiling, so it's again extra storage that is perfect for what I need. It's again a newer piece, but it does lend itself to that traditional look, and you can see the back of it is like a beadboard. One of them is dark painted navy, and the other one is wallpapered in a traditional William Morris paper. So again, it's been adapted to have a vintage feel. As we go down the hallway before the library, I have a vintage pith helmet from the First World War. I have a sun hat and a boater, and then this is my trophy wall, as such as it is, which is typically sort of English country thing. And then this is the library, which to me is so British, so English feeling in its look. I have everything stored here at the moment because I'm having a garage sale and getting rid of stuff, so that's why it's a mess. But everything in here is also, I don't know what to do with this. This is the ugliest thing. I wish I'd never made it, but I digress. Everything in here is thrifted, other than the computer. It is so chock full of lovely old items from all different eras, and it all mixes together so perfectly well in this room. And the grandparents in the pictures, there's my mum and dad's wedding photo. Everything in this room is old, and it all just works together. So I look around my home. I've got French country, I've got Edwardian, Victorian, I've got arts and crafts, I've got it all. Decorating with vintage is a wonderful way to give your home character and unique style, and that style has come from your history. It has come from the way you've grown up, and you've picked things up along the way that you love, and you surround yourself with those things. How can you go wrong? What story is your home telling? Whether it's vintage heirlooms passed down through the generations or lucky finds picked up at yard sales, the pieces that you surround yourself with tell your story, and that's what your home is doing. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed my thrifted home tour and you like the story that my home's telling you. And we'll see you next week.